short shrift them. We're going to learn what we need to learn in order to have a good understanding. So I probably need to stop telling you and start showing you. Let's take a look. Last time, after you learned that muscles cross joints to bring about certain kinds of movements that have names, we then learned, and I pushed for the people who are here to look at this portion of the lab very carefully because it directly related to a test you just took today. So what the people did was they reacquainted themselves with how muscle was organized, and then in particular we spent time taking a look at the organization of the sarcomere, the organization of a muscle fiber, and the neuromuscular junction. If you weren't here for that experience last Wednesday, Lab 10 is a great way to get up to speed, and there are some terms on the pink sheet that are associated with Lab 10. Okay? Otherwise, we move on then to learning about the muscles of the body, and for that when we go to Lab 11. In Lab 11, you start off with some kind, I will put a list of things to do up in a moment. In Lab 11, you begin to learn a little bit about how muscles in the body are organized, and you're seeing that we have axial and appendicular muscles. Many of our axial muscles are associated with posture. As we get through that introduction, okay, then you begin to, and I wanted to show you a few of these, you begin to see how muscles attach to the skeleton and how this attachment affects what they do. Okay? This one right here, the masseter. It's this one right here. If you clench your teeth, the masseters bulge. If you look at a pit bull, he's got huge masseters. They have very strong bites, those dogs. Okay? You'll notice here it says, the masseter is a muscle of mastication. Is that a bad word? Are you allowed to say that in public? Did your mother tell you not to do that? Okay. It is attached to the lateral surface of the mandible and the zygomatic arch. The muscle elevates the mandible. The lesson here is that you are just been told how the muscle attaches to the skeleton, what joint it crosses over, and then when it contracts, when its fibers shorten, the action that is the result. The origin of the muscle is the zygomatic arch, right up here. When the masseter contracts, it's not the zygomatic arch that moves down, it's the mandible that moves up. The origin of a muscle is that bony portion or muscular portion that the muscle attaches to that doesn't move when the muscle contracts. The insertion then is the lateral surface of the mandible. And if you were to get out a mandible and look at it right on this edge, it's kind of rough there to accept the masseter's attachment. It then says the muscle is an elevator of the mandible. It raises the mandible up. Why tell you all this? If you were to have the time to spend a little bit of time learning about what muscles do, how they attach to the skeleton, what actions they bring about, it'll be a better experience for you. Could you get through this unit just by learning and memorizing all the muscle names? Of course you can. What I'd like is a better learning experience for you. So this portion of the lab is helping you understand some of the terminology that you encounter if you read. Okay? Let's see this last page, and then I'll just give you the kind of the rundown. This is 167 in Lab 11, and here you are being introduced to terminology: agonist, antagonist, synergist. Agonist or prime mover is a muscle that directly brings about specific action. For example, the biceps brachii is an agonist for flexion of the forearm. That's the primary job. That's about the only thing that it does. And so, it is attached up here in the scapula. It's attached down here to the radius. When the fibers shorten, it crosses the cubital joint. It pulls on the radius, bringing about a flex. Okay? In that role, it is the prime mover or the agonist of the elbow joint as it flexes. Okay? An antagonist then is a muscle that opposes the action. I think you would find that our muscular movements would be very jerky if at the same time an agonist was contracting, an antagonist was in a partial state of contraction, helping to control the flex. So this back here is the triceps brachii, and the triceps brachii antagonizes the biceps brachii, and together they flex and extend, but control the cubital joint very carefully. Okay? We can also then have synergists. The brachioradialis, which is a muscle right here on the side here, it's right here. This forearm muscle, the brachioradialis, also plays a role in flexion. Its origin is up on the lateral supracondylar ridge, and then it inserts down on the radius. Its shortening of fibers does this kind of movement as well. So it works along with the biceps brachii. They are synergists. They work together. This is a quickie on basic muscle terminology, okay? There's a lot more that you can learn. Let me show you what we're doing today, get you started, okay? Of course, we'll be happy to show you the muscles of the head, neck, trunk, eye, and then the upper limb today after you've had a chance to get started on your own. Here it is. Oh, you can't see that. So we took a look at this, okay? You've learned a bit about how muscles bring about movement, all right? Activity 11.2, you begin to learn muscle names. Activity 11.3, eye muscles. 11.4, muscles of neck. 11.6, muscles of abdominal wall. Okay? So you will begin to learn your muscle names, and the pink sheet becomes extraordinarily important as you go through this process. We have models that we'll be using. Give me another few minutes. This is what I mean by muscle man. There is a taller one over there, which is also a human being, also has the same muscles on it. This is the model that I'll be using primarily for muscles of head, neck, torso. Arm muscles will switch to this one here. It's a bit bigger, a little bit easier to see. Okay? This is a model that shows us, in general, the superficial muscles. That is, muscles in the body are layered oftentimes. There's a nice diagram in your book that shows the abdominal muscles, how there are actually 3 layers of muscle there. Internal, external obliques, and the transversus abdominis. In pigs, we love it. It's bacon. We eat it, okay? But the primary thing here is that you have multiple layers of muscle. It's the same thing here as well, particularly like back in here. There are a lot of deep muscles here that are not shown on this model. Moral of the story is, on our pink sheets, we stick to superficial muscles primarily. Some of our models are what they refer to as dissectable, okay? That is, you can grab this, and unfortunately they get loose, and then they always fall apart. You try to get it from there to there, and 5 pieces fall off on the way. But if you take these forearm muscles off, you can now start to see some muscles underneath. So the model makers try to do the best they can to show you all the muscles of the body, but there's limitations, as you might expect. Best way to see muscles, cadaver, cat anatomy, that kind of stuff, where you can literally cut the real thing. You can cut a tendon, pull that muscle back and see what's underneath. Cut those and pull those back, see what's underneath. Okay? All right. So these are the models we'll use. They have keys, if they help. All of our models are over there, and unfortunately our prep staff doesn't do as great a job as they should putting them all back together and organizing the keys. So if you have trouble finding a key, let me know if you want a key. Your lecture book, your lab book are really good at this. All right? When you look at keys, some of our models are made in Europe, and the terminology may be slightly different. The numbers may look a little different. Ever wondered why there's 7s with a little line in the center? Anyone? Okay, that's the European way to distinguish a 7 from a 1, which could look very 1-like, but you don't need to know all that. All you need to know is that sometimes muscle names won't quite jive with what you're currently seeing. Ask for clarification, I'll help you out. The last model that we'll be using is back here. This is the model of the eye. We have newer models and older models, and they have seen a lot of use. The eye, what's that?
No pun intended?
Yes. What would have been the pun there? They have
They've seen.
Ah. Yeah. The eye has what are referred to as extrinsic eye muscles, muscles that move the ball. There are muscles inside the eye as well, which we'll learn later on, okay? There are 6 extrinsic eye muscles, and when I show you these muscles, I'll tell you a little bit about ways in which muscles are named, okay? But this is the model. There is a key back here. There are sometimes problems associated with having older and newer models, is sometimes the keys get mixed up. So just ask, and I'll point you in the right direction. Yes, ma'am?
What's the meaning of extrinsic versus intrinsic in this context?
Good question. Extrinsic is a term for outside of, and intrinsic inside of.
Oh.
Okay? It may be there's, the heart is controlled both extrinsically, extrinsically. The heart has its own intrinsic controls over its pace, but yet the nervous system also affects it as well. So that's called extrinsic control.
Okay.
Any questions or anything? I'll let you go ahead and get started. Your lab manual does teach a lot. If you have time, read it, follow along. I do totally understand if you're just trying to get the major muscles down, okay? I would like to remind you that we're not to have food and drink in here, okay? I